Hello and welcome back. I am Kavya and today I'll be discussing the chapter Single Factor Design, which is Unit 1 of Block 3 of MPC005 Research Methods of MAPC IGNOU, that is MA Psychology IGNOU. So we have completed the first two blocks by now, and now we are going to the third block. In third block is talking about different types of research designs. So we'll be seeing different types of research designs in this block. And again, please remember that we are discussing this from the point of view of exam. So we'll be quickly going through all the important points and we'll be just understanding the concepts that are important to write the exam. So again, I'll also be highlighting and telling you which all are the portions that have been asked in the past exam question papers. So please have your textbook, the physical copy or the soft copy. When I've read through the entire text, I have realized that there have been few mistakes. So while I'm also talking about these, when I'm discussing these chapters, I'm also telling you where the mistakes are and what is the right alternative that we have to read them. Okay, so Block 3, Unit 1, Single Factor Design. So the chapter starts with the meaning of research design. By now we have already learned and understood and realized what all are the impacts or the significance and the steps and the advantages. All of this we have already covered, but this is just to give an introduction to the various types of research design methods that we are going to see in this block. Okay, so we are not going to spend a lot of time on this, but still just to tell you, research design is the plan, structure and strategy of investigation conceived to obtain answers to research questions. That is the first part that we've been discussing in the first unit, and towards the end of second unit we also said that research has to control variance. Okay, so here also we'll be talking about that. So research design is a plan, structure and strategy of investigation conceived to obtain answers to research questions and to control variance. So it is a blueprint or a detailed plan. So we go to the next topic, which is function of a research design. So I'll be just highlighting the important points in each topic. Okay, I'll just tell you which point I'm discussing and which topic I'm discussing and the important point I'll put. The next is the function of a research design. So function of a research design is to provide answer to the research question and to enable the researcher answers the research question as validly, accurately and economically as possible. So we talked about validity and reliability, that's important. Accuracy is important, which means we need to do the right experimental test, we need to design the right question or whatever. The right instrument for the design should be there, and the right method of analysis and right conclusions, and it should be economical so that it is possible for us to do it repeatedly as and when needed. The main function of research design is to control variance, which already we said in the above, in the first part and also in the last block. We are coming to the basic terminologies in research design. One is factor. Factor is also the independent variable. And an experiment always has at least one factor or one independent variable. Second is level. So level is a particular value of the independent variable. Every independent variable has at least two levels. Example, I'm going with the one that's given in the text. The effect of reward on verbal learning. So reward is a factor and it has two levels, either reward or no reward. That are the two levels. For example, if you're thinking about what is the religion of a person, if religion is a independent variable or a factor, then we have more than two levels for it. It could be Hindu, Christian, Muslim, Sikh, Parsi, whatever. So there are a lot of options over there. The third is, so we are talking about factors, levels, and the third is treatment. So treatment is the experimental condition that we are testing. Okay. So For example, in 2 by 2 factorial experiment, it's 2 cross 2 or 2x2, we read it as 2 by 2. In 2 by 2 factorial experiment, subject is assigned to 4 treatments. So 2 by 2, which means 4. 4 treatments will be there in a 2 by 2 experiment. So here we are talking about single factor design. So this chapter will be talking about single factor design. Okay. In this single factor design, we have only one independent variable. Okay. And this is explain single factor design, or explain single factor design with examples, or what are the types of single factor design, or compare and contrast the different types of single factor design. All these have been repeated questions in the exam for 10 marks. So all of the points that I'll be telling further, all of it needs to come in. Okay. So single factor design, we understood, as we say, single factor, there is only one factor or one independent variable, and we do it in different types. So one is between group design, the other is within subject design. Okay. So for now, you just remember the two types, between group and within subject. So now we are going to understand in detail what these are, so that it's easy for you to remember to write it in the exam. To help you understand this better, I'll just tell you the meaning of this. So one is between group. That is the groups on which we are going to give the test. We are going to find some differences between them. So between two things. Okay, like that, or between multiple things. So for example, if we have experimental group and a control group, there are two groups. So we do the test between these two. So the first group also gets a test and the second group also gets a test. That is an example of between group design. And other is within subject. That is, subject is the person on whom the test is being done. So if I am a subject for an experiment, for a research, then I will be experiencing all the different levels of the independent variable. Okay. So for example, if it is about sound levels, my ability to hear. So first I'll get the high sound, then I'll get a low sound. So all the various conditions are put on the same subject. So that is within subject. It is inside the same subject. Okay, that is the basic difference between group design and within subject design. In the between group design, we have two options. One is two randomized design, the other is multi-group design. So the two group randomized design. So there will be two group on which the randomized design will happen, and the other is multi-group. The first is two group and the second is multi-group. So subjects will be given at random the different conditions, and effect of these different conditions on the subject are then assessed. Okay. So the first is two randomized group design, or the two group design. In the two randomized group design, we randomly assign subjects into two groups. So in the between group design, in both types of between group design, subjects will be randomly assigned. So which people will fall into experiment, or which samples will fall into control group, nobody knows. That will be randomly decided. Okay. So example, for this, the experimenter will first define the independent variable, dependent variable, and the research population, or the samples, the sample population. For example, when the investigator wants to see the effect of knowledge of result on the rate of learning of school students in a particular city. That means what the researcher is trying to study is, if the students are learning something, and when they are tested about whatever they have learned, if they are getting feedback on how they performed in their test, then they will give better performance on subsequent tests. So that is, or they may not give better performance on subsequent tests. So the research is trying to understand what will the effect be if the children know if there is a knowledge of result. So will they perform better, or will they not perform better? So the researcher will randomly select a sample, and in this case selecting 100 students, and then randomly divide the students into two groups. Okay, so total 100, so 15 one group, 15 the other group. And here what they do is, we have learned in the past chapter how the sampling is done, the random sampling is done, different methods of random sampling. We learned random sampling, stratified sampling, cluster sampling, all of that. So we just follow simple random sampling. Either list all the names and then put it in a bowl and then take one sheet and say, okay, all these, whatever I'm taking the first 50 for the group 1. Something like that, or maybe write all the names and then randomly give them numbers. So different ways of random assignment can be done. And then the group 1 is the experimental group, the group 2 is the control group. So the assumption is, at the start of the research there will not be any significant difference between the two groups, and the experimental group students will receive knowledge of the result of their performance, and the control group does not receive such a feedback on their performance. Then the scores of all subjects of experimental and control group will be recorded and subjected to statistical analysis. If the statistical test reveals that the two groups differ significantly on dependent variable, that is, if there is a large variation in the dependent variable or the results of the test, then it can be concluded that there is difference in the rate of learning when the independent variable was manipulated. Okay, so that is, if there is a higher result in the, if the rate of the learning of experimental group is higher, then we can conclude that knowledge of result actually did facilitate the learning here. So when we do the two randomized group design, we analyze the results using t-test or the Mann-Whitney U-test. So we are coming to the second type of between group design, which is a multi-group design. Okay. So in multi-group design, there will be more than two randomized groups. So this is very common in behavioral research. There will be more than 2 or 3 experimental groups, and there can be one control group, or there can be multiple experimental groups alone and no control group. It could be done in different ways. So here one example is given where in an educational experiment, the researcher wants to study the effect of schedule of reinforcement on the rate of learning of a verbal task. So that means the schedule as to when all the reinforcement is given and the rate of learning, and this is done on a verbal task. Verbal task as in something related to spelling or words or something like that. Okay, so reinforcement means again, like the past example, like a performance review. So when students perform in the verbal task, they will be given some performance review, and then again they will have the test conducted or done on them. Okay, so in this case we are looking at the schedule, so which means we have 3 experimental groups and 1 control group. So the experimental group 1 will receive reinforcement for every response. So when they are learning the one word, they'll get some reinforcement, like, okay, if I learned it fast, then I'll be telling, okay, very good. If I learned it slow, then okay, not so good. So that reinforcement will keep happening after every task is done. In the second group, they get reinforcement at a regular time interval. So maybe say after every 5 words. So after 5th word, after 10th word, after 15th word, they get a feedback or the reinforcement. And the third group gets the reinforcement at random. At times they may get it after the 2nd word, sometimes they may get it after the 10th word, sometimes after the 13th word. So no specific schedule on when they are being given the reinforcement. And the control group gets no reinforcement. So then we'll be measuring the rate of learning, and then we use the statistical technique to understand which method was best. And also another example I was saying is when there will be multiple experimental groups and no research group, no control groups. So the next example given in the text is about that. So when an experimenter wants to study the effect of various teaching methods. So they take 100 students randomly and then divide them into 4 groups. each group will have a different teaching method, and then they'll again analyze the results and see which teaching method gave better results in students. So in multi-group design, most commonly applied statistic tool is one-way analysis of variance or one-way ANOVA. We'll be hearing this term a lot in the other subject, MPC006 or statistics. So one-way ANOVA and Duncan range test. Okay, so here also when we are talking about the groups between group design, when we talk about groups, so we said in the multi-group design we have different groups. How are we going to decide who will form which group? Okay, so who will get which test? So for that we have one way is random assignment. The first way we were talking about the randomly assigning. The second way is matching groups and assigning. So that's called as matched group design. So the subjects will be subjected to test by matching them. There will be some criteria for matching the groups. That is matching group design. The first one we were talking about is random assignment. Okay, in random assignment also we had two group design and multi-group design, and another method is matching the groups. So this matching group design is also known as randomized block design. So here what they do is all the subjects of the population are first tested on a common task and their performance is evaluated, and then they will be formed into groups. So this is a more time taking process. This is more expensive process. So again, depending on the topic that is being researched and depending on the conditions that are being researched, the researcher needs to make a decision if they have to do this or not. So once the subjects are initially tested on a common task, and then they are formed into groups which are called as equivalent groups, and then the values of the independent variable, different values of independent variable is being given, so that is where the testing is happening, and then the score of the dependent variable is taken, and the matching variable, here we talk about matching variable. So the testing is done on a matching variable. The independent variable on this test is called as matching variable, that will be connected to the actual dependent variable that we will be getting from the actual test. So the matched group design is a method wherein we are using the process of matching groups. It's also called as randomized block design. So we are matching the groups to decide who will be our subjects. Okay. So here in the between groups, so the kind of groups, so previously we randomly put people into two groups. So we had 100 people and then we have to put it into two groups. So we randomly pick 50 and put them in one group. We randomly pick another 50 and put them into another group. So here in the matched group design, we are not doing a random process, but instead we do it as a randomized block. Not a random person, it's randomized block. Block means it's a group. Okay. So we'll do a test first. And in this first test, the independent variable is there and we call it as a matching variable. And this variable will be, and then we have the actual test. Actual test also has an independent variable and a dependent variable. So in the first test that we do, the independent variable here will be connected or related to the dependent variable in the actual test that will be done. Okay. So matching variable is different from the variable which will be tested or studied, or the independent variable which is studied, but it is connected to that independent variable and that dependent variable that comes out of it. So the two groups that we make after we do this matching group design need not be of the same size. Okay, one group may have 10 people, another group may have 12 people, but there will be some similarity in the numbers. Okay. Most important factor to do this matching group design is identifying the variables on which we can do the matching. So identify the matching variable. So it should be highly correlated with the independent variable and the dependent variable that is being tested and the result is being found out. Okay, sometimes the dependent variable, sometimes we also use the dependent variable as a matching variable. We are going to an example. When a researcher wants to see the effect of praise on subjects' performance on intelligence test. Again, we are going with all examples which are similar to the ones we discussed before. So here the actual test is, we want to see if praising a student's performance will show a better correlation to their intelligence. So the variable that will be manipulated there is the praising will be done. So praising that is offered on the subject will be the independent variable, and there the dependent variable will be the intelligence. And here what we are going to do is, we are going to have two groups. One group will be praised when after they perform, and they will be asked to do better in future tests. Second group does not receive any praise or any comment. So for assigning the group into two groups, for assigning the subjects into two groups, researcher needs to find scores on form A of the intelligence test. That is, so here we are trying to identify the intelligence. So intelligence is a dependent variable. So what we are doing here is, we are trying to find a matching variable. So to do the test whereby we can match the subjects. Okay. So they had told us earlier that it could be a different test where it could be a different independent variable, or we can even use the same dependent variable itself as a matching variable. Okay. So here the actual test, praising is the independent variable. So the two levels of praising are, or the two levels of the independent variable or the factor are, one is giving praise, second is giving no praise, okay, after the test performance. And there the dependent variable is the performance of intelligence. So first they will be given a the student will be asked some question, and they will be asked to give some performance, written or verbal or oral, something like that on that. And the first group will get some feedback and some praise on that. Okay, you did well, you did not do well. I mean, not you did not do well. So if you did well, you did well. So keep it up. Or if you didn't do well, they'll say that okay, you couldn't do really well this time, but maybe try better for the next time. So something like that. And the second group, they just administer the test and they don't get any feedback or any praise. Okay, so that is the actual test that we are going to do. And here what we are going to measure is the intelligence level. Okay, so what they do is, intelligence level is the dependent variable, and that is itself chosen as the matching variable. So this particular test that we are going to do on them, okay, so maybe we can call it as test A. So what we'll do is, we'll take test B, which also measures intelligence, and using this test B we can find, here it's given the opposite way. So they are using test A to find intelligence in the first instance. So all the students are there. I'm marking them. Okay, the first student got 100 marks, second student got 50 marks, third student got 120 marks, fourth student got again 100 marks. Maybe the test is out of 200 or something like that, or out of 150. So different values the students have got. Now I have a list of students, and then I'm saying, okay, so in this test, in the test when I did, there are 50 students who got 100 marks. So now what I'll do is, I take 100 as my base, and I'm taking all the 50 students who got 100 marks, and now I'll put them into two groups. Okay, and then the test will be done on them. And in the test will be also a test of intelligence, and then we'll not do the same test, we'll do a test B, a different test on them. So here suitable statistical test also needs to be done after this testing is done. So this is actually how we do the matched group design. Again, matched group design, here what we are talking about is a two group design. So matched group design is a two group design, and in a two group design, what we usually randomly assign. Here we were given an option to not randomly assign, instead find a randomized block. That is, the block here in the past example was, when we did the test A, it was group of students all who got 100 marks, and then we are randomly assigning them again. Then we are going to see how the methods of matching can be done. Okay, so one way of matching is matching by pairs. For example, it's not easy to get all students scoring 100 or get a large number of students scoring 100 marks. So instead what we are doing is, we'll be matching them by pairs. The first method is matching by pairs. If I am getting 2 students who get 80, 2 students who get 100, 2 students who get 50, 2 students who get 120. So then what I can do is, one student who got 100 will come into group 1, and one student who got 100 will go into group 2. One student who got 80 will come into group 1, another would go to group 2. Third, at 120, one will come to group 1, the other student will go to group 2. Like that, I'll be matching them by pairs. So the value that they got in the test. So that is how I match them. So I've just repeated the example here. I'm just saying the previous example itself can be used to explain this. The text has given a different example. And the second way of matching the subjects is in terms of, the first one was matching by pairs. The second is matching in terms of mean and standard deviation. Okay, so that is when it is not easy to get a person to person match, then what we do is we try to find the mean and standard deviation. That is, the matching variable is related to the dependent variable. So intelligence is a matching variable, and research obtains the score of mean and standard deviation of intelligence score for 2 groups, and whoever whichever people match, they just put them into the different groups. Okay, so in match group design, that is one way of doing it. Another way can be to match the subjects by age. So when I do the test, 2 people will be of age 10 years, 2 people will be of 11 years, 2 people will be of 9 years. So one here in one group, other in the other group, like that. Or the educational qualification, or their learning ability, whatever. So whatever we do, when we do this matching when we do this matching group design and we match the subjects, we should put a lot of care and thought into choosing the right matching variable. Okay, so in single factor design, we have one is between group design, and in between group design we have 2 randomized group design or a multi-group design. Depending on the number of groups the subjects are divided into. In 2 randomized design, we just randomly assign the subjects into 2 groups. One is experimental, one is control group. Multi-group design has multiple experimental groups and a control group, or it has multiple experimental groups alone. And in the 2-group design or the group design, when we take the subjects, or even in the multiple group design, when we choose the subjects, instead of randomly assigning them, we can also do randomized block design of assigning them into the different groups, which is also known as match group design. That can be done in 2 ways. One is matching by pairs, or other is matching by mean and standard deviation. So when we do matching by pairs, we administer them to another test which has a matching variable which is connected to the dependent and independent variable of the actual test, and then we take the scores by which they match and then put them into different groups. Or what we do is we take the mean and standard deviation of the particular matching variable for each group and then match them accordingly, and then split these matched people into the different groups and then do the testing. So then we are coming to the second type of single factor design, which is within subject design. Okay, within subject design is also known as repeated measure design, because the same subject is subjected to, the same subject goes through multiple tests, and the values of the independent variables manipulation is being repeatedly measured. So which is why it is called repeated measure design. So same individual treated differently at different times and compare their scores after they've been subjected to different treatment conditions. Example, to study the effect of colors on reaction time. Okay, so how will a person find the subject? How will I respond when I see different colors? My reaction time, my response time when I see different colors. So investigator selects 3 colors: red, green, yellow, and 10 subjects are selected for the experiment. So after exposing them to, so this within subject design is also divided into 2 categories. One is 2 conditions within subject design, and second is multiple condition within subject design. Okay, so in the past one, that is the between group design, we were telling that there could be 2 groups, there could be multiple groups, and in two groups and the multiple groups. The first way was randomly assigning, so two groups random assign and multiple groups random assign, and the other type was two groups matching by pairs or the randomized block design, and the multiple groups also and the matching can be done by pairs or matching in terms of mean and standard deviation, and this can be applicable for the multiple group design also, multi-group design also. Okay, so here we are not talking about different groups who are being administered the test. Instead we are talking about the subject, the same subjects being given multiple conditions of the test, multiple levels of the factor or the independent variable. So there is one is two conditions within subject design, others multiple conditions. The two conditions are simplest design, so condition 1 and condition 2. Okay, and all subjects will be experiencing both the conditions. Example, the researcher wants to compare reaction time of red and green color. So when we select 10 subjects, reaction time of all the subjects is noted down for both the colors. So this design is not used very commonly because mostly researchers will have multiple conditions. So and also to avoid any carryover from one condition to other, they prefer doing a multiple condition design. Okay. So the next is multiple condition within subject design. So psychology experiments are one field where we usually need more than two conditions. So to compare several variables or treatments and understand which is better, ascertain their effectiveness. Another reason to conduct this is to determine how these two interact, or that is the shape of the function which relates independent and dependent variable. Example, to know how the sensation of brightness increases with the physiological intensity of light. So the independent variable here is physiological intensity of light. So low intense light, medium intense light, high intense light, something like that. And then to understand how a person senses the brightness and how it increases when the increases or changes with the light. So the researcher presents several intensity of the light to the group of the subjects, and then from the response to various intensity, the researcher can plot the relation between intensity and the brightness response. So I'm just going to talk to you about a very famous example that has been done for this multiple conditions within subject design. It was done by Fergus, Craig and Endel Tuluy in 1975. So they did a test to understand whether different strategies of processing words would affect memory. So they use different strategies to help a subject process a particular word. Okay, so they flash certain words on the screen. Like a subject is sitting here, they will show some word on a screen, that is flashing a word on a screen, and before each word came, they asked the subject questions. Okay, so one question was, is the word in capital letters? For another word, they'll ask, does the word rhyme with train? The third question would be, for a third different word will be, does it fit in a particular sense? So for example, they gave the word train, so they'll tell a sentence with which uses the word train and ask them, does it make sense? So it's like, I ate a train. No, it doesn't make sense. But if I say I travel by train, that's a sensible sentence. So they just say, when they show word train, they'll give a sentence and ask them if it is connected in the meaning that makes sense. Okay, so that are the three ways in which when they show a particular word, or they'll make you remember the word with different processing technique. Okay, so the first thing is a word in capital letters. That is a visual property of the word. So that is a visual processing for the word. The next is the sound connection. So that is a auditory processing or the acoustic processing. And third is the semantic processing, which is related to the meaning. Semantics means related to the meaning properties. Okay. The researchers here hypothesized that each successive strategy would induce greater depth of processing. So they thought that if you give different kind of strategies, that will improve the subject learning and remembering the word. Okay, so they thought that when they give different strategies, they would remember it better. So what the experimenter here would do is, they'll give a word and they'll adopt different strategy, and the type of strategy that was being used was randomly varied. That is, sometime it would be the acoustic, sometime it would be a visual clue, sometime it would be a semantic clue. So something and all they'll be given. It's no order that this is a particular order. So for example, if I'm a subject and I'm shown 10 words, for some of the words I'll be shown a visual clue, some of the words I'll be shown a semantic clue, some words I'll be shown an acoustic clue, and it will be done in any order. Okay. After all the words were presented, experimenter gave the subject a list which contained all the words that were shown to them, and also along with an equal number of words that were not shown. So if there were 10 words that were shown to me, I'd be given a list with 20 words. 10 words which were shown will also be there, and another 10 words which are not shown to me will also be there, and all of these will be randomly put in the list. Okay, and they asked the subject to indicate which words they could recognize as part of this memory test. So after the test, they actually saw that the memory was actually a function of depth of processing induced by the question. So only 18% of the visually processed words were being identified or recognized by the subjects. 70% of acoustic or verbally produced verbal clues that actually helped them, and in 96%, when the semantics were given, the semantically processed words were remembered. Okay, here the table also shows us how they are doing the collecting the data. So the table has a heading and shows subject and treatment conditions. Subjects 1 to n. The treatment T1, T2, T3. One is visual, one is acoustic, and another is semantic. So they would have labeled something, and then they are calculating the value. So which subject remembered how many words when they were given visual, how many words they remembered when they were given acoustic, how many words they remembered when they were given semantic clue. And like that, they tried to analyze the data and found out that semantic processing was the most effective. So that is understanding the meaning, understanding the concepts. I think that's a very sensible thing also, because which is why here also that's what we are doing. We are trying to understand all the topics by understanding the meaning and understanding the concept that is gone behind it. Okay. So here, when we are giving different conditions to the subject, so we were talking about two types of within subject design. One is two conditions and other is multiple conditions. So when we have two conditions, we have only one order. First you give it's only verbal and acoustic clue. So first you give verbal clue, then you give acoustic clue. Or maybe you can do it, first you give acoustic clue, then you can give verbal clue. But when there are multiple conditions, you need different strategies. So because the subject experiences more than one experimental condition, the possibly exists that order effect and sequence effect may influence the result of repeated testing. Order effects means those are result from ordinal position in which condition appears, regardless of the condition. So which order, first did you give acoustic, which did you give visual, whatever. Yeah. And sequence effect depends on interaction between the different conditions. So if first I get to hear sequence effect, so first I get to hear visual and then I get to hear acoustic, maybe it makes sense. First I'm seeing, then I'm hearing the sound. Or if I'm given the opposite way, if I'm given first the acoustic and then seeing, maybe then the impact is not so much. So that sequence effect is also very important. So sequence means how the different conditions interact. Order means which order these conditions are being given to us. Okay. So for example, in an experiment when judging heaviness of lifted weights, there is possibility that a light weight will feel more light if it is lifted after a heavy weight. So if first you're giving 70 kgs to lift and then you are asked to lift 60 kgs, the 60 kgs will feel even more lighter than 60 because you already now experienced lifting 70 kgs, and this can happen vice versa also. So controlling for order and sequence effect is possible by randomization. So it's a random decision which will be given first and last. And it is used when each condition is given several times to the subject. For example, if there are 4 conditions, in the last experiment we are talking about 3 conditions: visual, acoustic and semantics. For example, if there are more than 3, 4 conditions or 5 conditions, and each of these conditions need to be given 2 times. So then you have to follow different orders so that there is no effect of sequence or order effects. This randomization is useful when conditions are presented several times to each subject. So when there are relatively less number of subjects, the conditions need to be presented less number of times. Then we can use a technique called as reverse counterbalancing. We'll learn this in detail in another chapter in future. But we use the technique reverse counterbalancing. For example, if we initially give condition A, B, C, then we give the opposite order, C, B, A. Okay, that is reverse counterbalancing. If you remember it here, great. If not, it's not very important. We just need to understand the within subject, the 2 types of within subject. One is 2 condition, other is multiple condition. And when you give multiple conditions, we need to be sure of the control for sequence and order effects. Okay. So now comparing between the group and within subject design, you can see it as a new heading also here, so that you can understand these differently. So we already learned the between group and within subject designs. Now we are trying to understand how they are, they can be compared, how they are different they are. Okay. The first point, in the within subject design, each subject receives number of treatments or conditions, and in the between subject design, a subject receives only 1 treatment. Okay. So it's a between subject. Here they've given it as between subject. What we already learned it was as between group design. So in the between group design, a subject receives only 1 treatment. Okay. So they've used different names. You just need to be mindful where they're used and what it actually stands for. In the within subject design, experimenter, that's one difference. Second difference is, in within subject design, experimenter repeats measures on the same group of subject, and it increases the precision by eliminating inter-subject differences as a source of error. That is, if we are doing a within subject design, the test is done, and we are suppose we are measuring the test of intelligence. The test is happening once on me. The second time also the test is happening on me. So it is done on the same person intelligence, and we are just trying to use different techniques to learn to see how my intelligence increases. First I am given one way, I am taught in one way, and then they are trying to measure how much my intelligence on that topic has increased. Next I am taught in a different way, and then we are again measuring. So within myself, the differences could be less. That's what they say, increase the precision by eliminating inter-subject differences. So there is only one subject, so there is no inter-subject difference. But if there are 2 of us, so I am A and the other person is B, and they are teaching me with one method and calculating my intelligence, teaching B with another method and calculating the intelligence. So even the differences, it's the answer or the actual effect is not just dependent on the method of teaching or the independent variable. It could be extraneous variables like how much capacity do I have to remember versus the person B, how much capacity do they have to remember. So there could be external influences. So within subject design is actually helps increase the precision. So we learned this when we were learning the reliability and variability validity chapter. So when there are chances of practice or carryover effect of one treatment to the other task, then the between group design. So within subject is good when we need to increase precision, but we need to use between groups when there is a sequence effect or a carryover effect. The third difference is that when we have less number of subjects and they are available for a long period of time for experimentation, and the number of treatment conditions that is to be given are also less, then we can definitely use within subject design. Okay, so these were the this was in detail about single factor design and also the differences between the two methods of single factor design, which is a between group design and within subject design. Okay, so this is a very important question, it's been repeatedly asked, so you can definitely learn this. And when we learn this, what we also will see is I am connecting it to different chapters that will come ahead and some chapters that we have already done. So that is very important, so that you understand what the subject is about and how to connect all these, because this is also important when we go to the next subject, which is statistics. All these will be very much connected to statistics. So research methods is a very strong base for the statistics subject. So thank you.